Welcome back. It's great to see everybody. I have a very special guest with us here today. There's two reasons he's special. First of all, he's right here in Atlanta. Actually, only a couple miles away from me, and we're sitting here on Zoom. I could wave to him. I drive by his building, 2-3 times a week on my way to the pool at Concourse here in Atlanta. It's not often I get to meet other cannabis professionals here in Georgia. So that's always very exciting. And second, Matt Johnson is VP of Risk Services for QuadScore, which is one of the premier insurance carriers, brokers in the cannabis industry. And as a CEO, this is something that constantly keeps me up at night, is risk. Every time there's a big hack at a very large company that's much larger than us, has much better systems than us, probably much better protections, the first call I make is to my insurance agent to talk about do we have enough coverage for our cyber security. It's something that's constantly being assessed. It's something that it can be an existential risk to the business. And here we are in cannabis, and with virtually zero actuary data to help determine risk. And here you are, VP of Risk Services. But help me understand how you reconcile a brand new service, a brand new industry, a brand new vertical with no history, no data, no actuarial tables. How do you service the cannabis industry? And you've done a really effective job. Help us understand that mystery.
Well, thanks, Dan. Like you said, there's a big challenge there. I used to work at a Berkshire Hathaway company before joining QuadScore, and at that company in particular, it was difficult for the underwriters to make any decisions until you had 10 years of loss data reviewed by actuaries and actuarial consultants, and then underwriting. It just ended up being a whole process. Now, although we didn't really have the luxury of having any of that data when we launched QuadScore, we were able to get into the market, penetrated rather quickly, and kind of rise to the top in terms of the size of our clientele. So we've been fortunate to work with some of the largest cannabis companies in the United States. And we've got now about 3.5 years worth of data from our own loss history that we can use to identify the largest claim drivers and problems in the space. About half a year ago, we also started an initiative to gather loss data from all of our competitors, which is a bit tricky to do. It is sometimes harder to get the full picture, but anytime we look at an account that has losses from another carrier, we're going to identify those losses, the cause of those losses, and what steps could have been taken to prevent those losses so that we can provide our insurers with that advice moving forward.
I would think that's the biggest message and biggest, everybody always thinks that insurance is there to protect you when you have a loss, but obviously your job is to help your clients prevent it in the first place, which is a win-win. Help us understand, what are the things you do? Concrete suggestions that you can give a grower, for example. What is the biggest loss, and what can they do to mitigate loss in a grow?
Sure. So we're not exactly the thought police from Minority Report or anything, where we want to stop a crime before it happens, but we do want to stop a claim before it happens. So with cannabis cultivation, there are a number of common hazards, not unique to any grower. These can range from pests or mold in the cultivation cycle if you've got improper humidity levels or other climate issues. We see a few structural issues if people are using kind of low quality greenhouses that can collapse in a severe wind or hail event. But by and large, the biggest loss driver for us with cultivation is simple fire. Actually, 80%, I think we're 81% of our losses on the fire side of things come from cultivation sites where growers are using outdated light bulb technology. Maybe I shouldn't say outdated per se.
Well, new LED lights don't have the same fire hazards that the older version growing lights have. Is that correct?
Correct. So I like to think of it as iPhones. You've got 4 different generations of cultivation lighting out there, starting with generation 1, incandescent. Generation 2 is fluorescent. Generation 3, high intensity discharge, which includes high pressure sodium, metal halide, ceramic halide, and a couple other bulbs more commonly used for projectors or car headlights. And then you get onto the 4th generation, which is LEDs. So if you're if you're using incandescent light bulbs, there's not much I can do to help you. That's probably not even an iPhone in this analogy. It's more of a flip phone, and that's fine. They're not very common or effective anymore. Fluorescent is the next level, and those are generally safer, pretty low energy and easy to maintain. That's going to be like your early generation iPhone. So those are still used occasionally in the early growth phases. We see them sometimes in clone rooms, less common in the further cultivation stages. What we're really concerned with here is the difference between the high intensity discharge lights versus light emitting diodes or LEDs. So like you hinted, they're LEDs. This is not to say that they're never going to break, they're never going to fail, but the likelihood of a failure is so much smaller. The lifespan of an LED is 100,000 hours on average, which is multiples more than you get from any kind of high intensity discharge light bulb. And you typically see a corresponding increase in the manufacturer's warranty, which is going to be at most 1 year for a traditional high intensity discharge bulb, but it could be up to 5 years for an LED array.
Yeah, so we're starting to see as the industry matures, my guess is the newer, larger growers are probably taking a less risky path to success. It's no different than you think of the airline industry and how safe it's gotten to fly. We take it for granted how safe it's gotten to fly, but it's basically years and years of safety data being digested and put back into the safety engine of the airlines that has made it so friggin' safe. So I gotta believe that in the case of cannabis and growing, it could be the same curve eventually to make it really, hazard-free, fire-free, where insurance carriers really are there as a safety net rather than because right now, from what I can see, is premiums, if you're a grower, are ridiculously expensive. And so anything you can do to mitigate those rates that's kind of your job, is to say, hey, you do this, not only you have less chance of a fire or a flood or a collapse. Yeah, it's an investment, but that's about helping them become a more mature business.
Absolutely. It's all about making sure you're using the right tools and technology along the way. There is absolutely, going to be a pricing difference in your insurance premium if you're someone who is taking the appropriate steps to mitigate risk and protect your business. We really value working with those operators who understand that it's really a win-win scenario when we're well aligned, right? If they're going to, well, was it Ben Franklin, I think, had the old saying, right? An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. That is very much how we look at it. If you want to invest $100 grand in updating your, lighting system at a 500,000 square foot cultivation site, that investment may well prevent a $5 to $10 million fire loss.
Right.
And no, we're not going to pass that fire loss on to you if it's a covered loss. We're going to pay that. We're going to get your business back running the way it should be. That's what insurance should do. However, we would much prefer to avoid that. We can reward our insurers with lower premiums if they're loss free, if they're using the right technology to safeguard their business, and it ends up being a win for us if we're paying out fewer claims, and a win for all of our insurers if they have lower premiums to pay because of good risk management techniques.
Right. Now, the obvious, we've talked about the obvious, that's mold, fire, that's the thing we hear about because it touches the product. Help us understand some of the other areas of risk that you look at and that cultivators and people that are touching the plant should be looking at.
Yeah. Oh, there are so many. So that I know exactly where I want to focus it, knowing your background and your company too. But there are really not quite infinite, but seemingly infinite perils that face the cannabis industry. I will be glad to say on record that this is the riskiest business in the United States that you can possibly partake in right now. It's a really hard space to operate, and you're dealing with all kinds of complex financial regulations imposed by your county, your city, your state, certainly by the federal government. You're dealing with all kinds of operational guidelines, restrictions on what you can sell, how you can label it. There are all kinds of things, but where we're really focused is identifying the areas where even just a small effort can prevent a huge claim down the road. There's no point in breaking your back and putting in thousands of hours of labor into something that's only going to prevent you from a small $10,000 loss. It's just not worth the input, right? One of the areas where just a little bit of work can go a really long way is with product liability. The United States of America, I don't need to tell you or probably anyone listening, it's a very litigious country. And what do lawsuits cost? They cost money. Worse than that, they cost time. Time that you could be spending focused on your business, focused on providing, cannabis to people either as medicine or as a recreational substance. There's so many better things to worry about than, oh no, I'm getting sued because I didn't do everything right. So we've got a lot of focus on that space. We've seen, some really tremendous litigation in comparable industries like pharma, for one, that you're very familiar with. Nicotine has certainly, I think a few fellows at the Reminger law firm just posted an article saying that there's something like 2,200 active lawsuits pending against manufacturers of nicotine vaping products. And if you think that cannabis is going to be immune from those lawsuits over the next 5, 10, 20, 50 years, I'd encourage you to think again. So we've developed a few different steps that can help our insureds really mitigate the risk that they face from that product liability, from that manufacturing, from that cultivation exposure, and keep their business safer and protected for the long run.
Well, one of the things that we see in the consumer packaged good, there's not a consumer packaged good out there that you see when you go to the QT or racetrack or Wawa, catch the Northeast. If you pull out a bag of chips or a soda, it always has an 800 number, an email for exactly that reason, product liability. Help us understand why that's important, why that would be a must-have for any consumer packaged good, including a cannabis product.
Yeah, so there are a lot of different examples I could use to really help nail this down, but let's go with a landmark case that a lot of people in cannabis are pretty familiar with, which I think would be the Cushy Punch gummy litigation. So to give you some background on the story, I'll leave out all the real juicy details, but the highlights are that towards the end of 2018, a flight attendant consumed the Cushy Punch gummy edible. Within 24 hours, they passed away. The cause of death is not something that I can really speak on. And it's not a claim that we handled here at QuadScore, but it's something that we've watched closely. The lawsuit for that death, that alleged wrongful death, was not filed until 2 years later. So the company had no idea that this suit was coming until it had been filed. Now, if you've got some kind of early warning system in place, if you've got a phone number where a customer can report an issue, or if you've got a QR code on the back of your product that will link people to your website, and they have some way of reporting any, we call an occurrence, any occurrence that could lead to a claim. We've seen all kinds of stuff from, the sale of gummies that have calcified and end up chipping someone's tooth to, maybe you get a rash from using a topical lotion. There are minor things that can really blow up in a big way if you don't get ahead of them. So if you've got a way where someone identifies, oh, these gummies weren't good anymore, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, so much better to log that immediately, have someone respond in good faith. Let me refund your order. Let me, see if you've got any medical bills we can help with. Let's talk, and let me see if I can help you before this turns into a lawsuit that's going to cost you a lot of time and money. It's going to cost me a lot of time and money. It's going to smear the name of my business that I've worked so hard to build this good reputation. If you can just avoid all of that with an early warning system, a good product recall strategy, you can save yourself so much time and effort down the road.
That's literally like building your house right next to a fire hydrant and getting a discount from the fire department, from your insurance company, because you live right next to a fire hydrant.
As long as it doesn't get in the way of your parking.
As long as it doesn't flood. Right.
Oh, yeah.
But
No,
yeah,
that's
I mean,
something to look at.
to me, a sense of success, a sense of maturation in the industry is when I go into a dispensary or see any CBD brand on any shelf and I pick it up. And if there is a mechanism on there with an 800 number or an email on there or a number to text, that to me will be a sign that the industry is maturing, that we're showing up and they're taking the lessons of risk seriously, because that is the perfect example of a step any company could take to really inexpensive step to take to mitigate future cost. One of the things that's unique to cannabis is obviously that it's illegal federally, which presents all kinds of unique challenges, I would think, to plant touching businesses, including the fact that you can't write off premiums as a business expense, which is very inconvenient depending on how you approach it. Help us understand some of the other nuances of cannabis that are unique because of federal legalization, and how the industry is going to change in the risk perspective when federal legalization happens.
Sure. So that's the $1 million question, right? When are we going to see some federal action here? Is it going to come first as descheduling? Is it going to be rescheduling? Are we going to see full-blown legalization? We're seeing some really interesting things going on. I believe it was the 9th District Federal Appellate Court last week that ruled hemp-derived intoxicating cannabinoids are in fact federally legal, thanks to the, let's call it, lacking definition of marijuana that the U.S. government put into place 50 odd years ago.
Right.
We're seeing a lot of stuff, but the good news is that everything seems to be trending in a direction towards legalization, normalization, and acceptance in the mainstream America. Rhode Island came online as the 19th state for adult use cannabis the past week now. Not sure when this will air, so that might be a little bit older by the time anyone hears it, but I believe we've now got 38 states with medical programs. I think 36 of those are actually active. Looking at you, Georgia.
Yeah, well, one of the great failures.
We'll just call it a future success. When it actually,
successful. Thank you, Matt. Thank you.
Can I call it a success right now? But something that we're watching eagerly as it develops in our backyard, certainly. So
as are we, and it is so disappointing to see legalization in Georgia in such disarray, and such a lost opportunity for this state that has cheap energy, cheap water, cheap labor, cheap land.
Oh, yeah, and urban population centers that have already taken steps at last. Right.
We should be the leaders in hemp and marijuana cultivation, there's no question. And we are going to be so far behind because of it, and it is disappointing as a fellow Georgian. But it is exciting to see that they finally have legalized it for a very, very narrow category of medical patients. Sure. But that is progress, and we cannot, get upset about any progress, but it's not much, really.
No, but one of the most exciting things about this fragmented approach towards legalization that we've seen in the United States is that every state has their own set of rules and guidelines and regulations, and what do we have to test for, what can we sell, how can we label it, what can it look like, can I sell a cannabis edible in the shape of a gummy bear? Or right. Is that going to appeal to you? There are so many little. We got a lot of.
We're gathering a lot of data on what works and what doesn't. We're seeing it reflected in the legislation too. In New Jersey and New York recently, we're seeing each level of legalization, I think, get better and better because of the learnings from our 10-year lesson from Colorado and subsequent legalizations. So exactly. I think you're right, and I think that from a risk perspective, bringing it back to risk, I think when you think about it that way, 10 years is a long time, and that is a long experiment. Certainly from a public health perspective, I talk about this a lot. The people in Colorado, citizens of Colorado, couldn't be more happy with what they did in legalizing cannabis. So certainly from a budgetary perspective, it's been a windfall, and every state could take lessons from that. But it's heartening to see legalization happening in the Northeast, and it's heartening to see the stigma dropping. The fact that you're sitting in a suburban office here in Atlanta with a bow tie, and I'm sitting in my home office here in Sandy Springs, 2 miles away, talking about cannabis, as a corporate issue and risk is showing me that we're arriving as an industry, and that's very, very exciting. That we're talking about these issues. We're not talking about, what gets you high and what strain is best. We're talking about real, deep, important, sometimes boring business issues.
Yeah. This is a great point to note where if you guys are having any trouble going to sleep, feel free to save the recording of this. The guy to talk about insurance, I think it can probably be a good sleep aid.
Well, actuary tables will put anybody to sleep, but it shows that a business is arriving, that an industry is arriving.
All jokes aside, that's one of our main goals here, is to bring a level of professionalism as well as professional services and insurance products that it just haven't been available to the cannabis industry. It's been mistreated for so long, without access to federally insured banking, without access to kind of standard market insurance products, without access to so much that every other industry is going to take for granted. So we want to come in and kind of fill that gap and set a bar for what the service should look like going forward. Because like we're saying, right, when federal legalization comes around, all of a sudden it's not a taboo thing for insurers to insure cannabis operations anymore. We've seen huge interest from the market at large around hemp, which has been federally legal since 2018 now. Much smaller market size, I believe projected to do somewhere around 5 to 6 billion in sales in the U.S. this year, where it has the state legal marijuana markets as an aggregate are going to do about $33 billion, according to the Marijuana Business Fact Book. That's a pretty significant disparity. When I got early on in 2020, I think it was $2 billion for hemp versus $20 billion for cannabis. So we've seen, I shouldn't say for cannabis, like they're different for intoxicating marijuana products, right?
I mean, everybody knows the growth. I mean, everybody looks at the 57 to $59 billion number by 2030, I think is the number I've seen thrown out there. I think it's actually going to be bigger than that in North America. That's my personal opinion. I think the pent-up demand is going to launch the industry in the next 10 years. I think the next decade is going to be crazy. It's exciting. Again, it's boring for some people, but it's exciting to me when I have these conversations, because it shows that next 10 years is going to be a period of normalization, destigmatization, and hopefully normal business practices with not too many losses.
Yes.
Well, Matt, it's really a pleasure to talk with you. I love talking insurance and risk in cannabis. It sounds kind of silly and actuary tables, but it is something that we should all cheer. It is something that shows the reason we want it to be legal is we want safe, legal, affordable access, and insurance is kind of one of that third rail piece to that business component that makes sure that happens. And it's off to the side, and we all drive our vehicles to work and to play every day because we're able to do that because we have insurance. We're able to live in our homes because we have insurance. Our cannabis industry will thrive because of players like you, and we really appreciate the role that you play in our industry.
Well, thank you, Billy. I appreciate those kind words, and this is really an area where I see tremendous potential for CannabisBPO too. I mean, if you run a cannabis business and you want to stay up at night, just Google cannabis product recalls. But some highlights from the past couple of years: you had over 60,000 pounds of cannabis affected by a recall in Michigan, thanks to issues with a testing lab up there. Pennsylvania, every vaporizing product from all but maybe 1 or 2 manufacturers in the state were pulled from the shelves because they're using additives not expressly approved by the FDA for inhalation. How the heck were you supposed to know that's an issue?
This is why we want it legal, so we don't have to ingest bad stuff.
And I mean, the list goes on. We've seen it in Oregon, California, Oklahoma. Virtually every state with the program has had a recall. So no matter how great of an operation you run, no matter what kind of lights you're using or vans you're using to distribute your cannabis, right, you could still be down the road in a lawsuit. Even if you're just a dispensary that is selling someone else's products, you can be named in a product liability lawsuit if they're selling something that's been improperly tested or happen to contain residual solvents or pesticides or something. It's an area where you really need to consult with your insurance broker, like you're saying. Ideally, you want to have a product recall plan in place, and I think CannabisBPO would be a really good component of that. making sure that you have a number to report those occurrences and log the adverse effects and jump on those as quickly as you can to react appropriately, whether it's identifying your insurance carrier or reaching out to the customer. You need to have some kind of plan in place, and there's so many other steps you can do, ranging from proper testing to becoming GMP certified. We're more than happy to help guide our clients through that, difficult process of, how do I really cover my business here? How do I make sure I'm protected from all angles? Even the areas that might not be directly insurable, at least not yet.
Yeah. GMP certification is the whole next level of we have arrived as an industry. And when we see GMP packaging widespread, I think with an 800 number and email on it, we know we will have arrived as an industry.
I'm with you.
That's my take on it. So let's keep our fingers crossed. But Matt, it's great to talk to you. It was wonderful catching up, and I look forward to having lunch with you around the corner very soon.